The sonata form is probably the most important single conceptual development in classical music from its appearance some 300 years ago right up to now. I'm going to try to do more than just understand what the sonata form is. I'm also going to try to explain why it was so effective, how it dominated musical composition for generations of composers, and why we should care now. The sonata form is one of those things in life that looks very complicated but is actually quite simple. It's a method of composing music, a three-stage process of production. Stage 1, take some music material. Stage 2, work on that material, develop it, before finally, Stage 3, bring back our original material, but usually in a changed form. Now, each of these sections have long and complicated sounding names, but that really is the entire principle of it. Present, develop, represent. In a way, this is storytelling 101, beginning, middle, end. Feature film script writing takes a similar structural approach with its 3-act dramatic structure. Characters are introduced, stuff happens to them, and they return home somewhat changed, beginning, middle, end. And it's worth just disambiguating the meaning here, because the sonata form isn't the same thing as the sonata. It's where the word originates clearly, but a sonata is a separate word meaning a piece of instrumental music, so you can have a sonata that isn't in sonata form. Anyway, this method of composing really took hold of the musical world from the classical age, from the 1750s onwards, and it became the de rigueur way to compose the first movement of, well, pretty much any work you wrote. You can pick up a Mozart piano sonata, a Beethoven symphony, a Mendelssohn concerto, a Haydn trio, a Tchaikovsky quartet, a Beethoven concerto, a Mendelssohn Mozart trio, a Brahms symphony, a Haydn concerto, any of them. Play that first movement and odds are, firmly, that movement will take place in sonata form. I think it's important to remember that this would be much more familiar, instinctively, to a 19th century music fan than for us today. The same way, for example, the verse-chorus of a pop song is familiar to most of us today. A contemporary audience for a Haydn symphony would have felt they were hearing the main theme, the way we can tell today whether we're hearing the verse or the chorus. Or think about it another way. The audience would feel that they're about to hear, for example, the recapitulation of the main theme, the same way the audience of a Western film knows they're about to see the final shootout. As audiences, we often know far more instinctively about art forms than we consciously realise. So, let's take a closer look at the sonata form to try to see what the attraction was for so very many composers. Well, the sonata form comes in 3 parts. The first section, the exposition, is where our musical material, our ingredients, are first presented. We usually get 2 sets, sometimes opposing, sometimes complementary, of themes, the main theme and a second theme. This immediately sets up the composer with something dramatic, something splashy to cook with, 2 different sets of material to use together or against each other. You have a discussion, an argument, a dialectic. This argument takes place in, secondly, the development section. This is where you cook up your ingredients. Now the material can be changed, broken up, reconfigured, transformed. There's no rules really. This is the part the composer can really have fun with. Strut their stuff, get dug in, make stuff happen, make sparks fly. Groovy. But stories and journeys must all end. In recapitulation, the final part of the sonata form, we return home, reintroducing our main themes. The usual convention is that the second theme returns in the home key, the tonic, but the aesthetic aim is often resolving any conflicts the way you should, resolve things before the end. And that's it. A simple musical structure that allows the composer to explore his material and then deliver it home neatly boxed. Simple in form, but complex in variety. It may need something to tie up the bow properly at the end. A coda perhaps? And then how about an introduction for the front? And that's only starting the possible variations. Take the main theme. This can be anything, long, short, a tune, small phrase, multiple phrases. And the second theme? Well, you don't need it. Oh, you can have it of course, or you can have 3 if you want. Remember, you could use your audience expectations of what's supposed to happen in the sonata form and not do that to create surprise or humour. And we're only talking about part 1, the entree. Next in development, you really can do anything. This was actually, circa the 18th century, a new way to treat music. Take an earlier form of music, a common musical structure that was used before the sonata form, theme and variation. With this form, the composer takes his first material, makes a variation of it, and a second variation, and then another. Now, that's all well and good, but it's a lot harder to get really emotional, to have a good dialogue, with a theme and variation structure. It's too rigid in form, and yet your main theme just keeps changing. It makes it harder to express a coherent set of emotional thoughts. With the sonata form, the composer can take a journey inwards through his emotion and express it in a dramatic form. He can stamp his ideas, his personality into the music. That means with the sonata form, there's often a journey inward through the composer's feelings, as much as an outward exploration of a musical idea. And I think this is the reason the sonata form, essentially a classical ear genre, remained so popular throughout the Romantic Age and beyond. It allowed 19th century composers like Beethoven, Brahms, Dvorak, Tchaikovsky to structure their music in a way that allowed them also to express themselves to us, the listener. The sonata form works so well because it is, in essence, a simple form but complex in variety. Now, you're welcome to plunge into the multiplicity of complexities that is the permutations of the sonata form. Entire books have been written about this. But it's worth bearing in mind you don't have to understand how a jet engine works to appreciate the beauty of flight. You don't need to know the panoply of different permutations of the sonata form in order to understand, to feel its effect. To put it with another flying metaphor, the physicist Richard Feynman recounts a story from his dad's childhood about a pupil on a school trip showing off to the other boys about how he knew the names of a bird. And not only in English, this kid knew that bird's name in half a dozen other languages as well. The other boys were really impressed. But, Feynman's father explained, this kid wasn't telling them anything about birds. He was just telling them something about languages. And he wasn't even explaining anything about languages. He was just giving the other boys a tiny list of words in different languages. It's sometimes possible to lose the wood from the trees. So, why should we care? Well, remember, the sonata form is probably the way you will encounter the majority of first movements from most classical music post-1700. That means if we can recognise, if we can feel when we're in a part of the piece where material's being introduced, and then we can feel that that material is being changed and developed, and then we can feel when that material is reintroduced back towards the end again, we're going to understand the structure, the narrative of that movement. Now we have a compass to navigate the start of thousands, and I mean thousands, of pieces of classical music. So, next video, I'm going to show the sonata form in action with a particular piece. So until then, bye.